Welcome to the Mojo for Musicians podcast from Manny Cabo Media, where we dig deep into today's top strategies to help you take your music career to the next level with real, raw, and uplifting conversations with industry professionals that are making moves, making a difference, and making the best versions of themselves to inspire you to do the same. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Manny Cabo, and welcome to another episode of Mojo for Musicians.
Yes. What's up, Mojo Maniacs? And welcome back to episode 29. Wow, we are 3 episodes deep already on season 3. And guess what, guys? They're just going to keep on coming because guess what? There is so much information out there that I need to get out to you guys. Because remember, my successes are your successes. And it's because of you that this show is now. That's right, guys. You ready? We're in the top 1.5% of the best music podcasts in the world. So thank you for your continued patronage and support of the show because, hey, I can't do this without your help. And talk about teamwork. Today's guest is someone who understands the value of teamwork and overcoming childhood hardships and cultivating their craft and appreciating life to the fullest. But more importantly, understanding the transitions that life can offer you and how to adapt to them, and it's all about serving others, which I'm completely in alignment with, as you guys already know. But before I bring him on, I want to highlight a couple of things that I think are indispensable, especially for musicians of all pursuits. So some of you, as one would expect, love the limelight, right? And who doesn't? But then again, there are those that like to be the behind-the-scenes guy or girl or the unsung heroes, if you will. And one piece of advice that I can give you, regardless of which one you are, there are certain elements that are a prerequisite if you're going to succeed in this industry. And on top of the list, guys, you have to be committed, all right? But not only to yourself, but to those that you agree to collaborate with. And the obvious one, which unfortunately many of you don't practice, is that you have to be likable. Let me repeat that. You have to be likable. People, hear me out. Nobody wants to deal with a dick, and I don't care how talented you are. And sure, it may have worked 20 to 30 years ago, but nowadays, with the possibilities and the opportunities being somewhat limited because of our imminent circumstances in this pandemic, like people are already stressed out enough, and they don't need your nonsense to add to the plate. So do yourselves a favor and be that person that's easy to work with and that you offer value, and whether it's your artistic or physical, mental, spiritual value, I don't care what it is, right? Make it an easy decision for someone to want to work with you and incorporate you into their team. Because in this business, at the end of the day, and I'm going to tell you quite bluntly, it's who you know. And it's only 10% of your talent and 90% of your hard work and dedication that will get you to that next level. Guys, believe me, there are no shortcuts with that. You got to put in the hours, and people have to want to work with you, period. For me, one of the biggest tools that I've implemented in my life and how I've managed to become such a good educator is because I'm an even better student. And believe me, I learn from everyone. And I've learned that from my dad. Like, he used to love to listen to everyone. But that's, of course, if your ego doesn't get in the way. You see where I'm going here? And for me, it doesn't matter what level of expertise you are, whether you're a novice or an intermediate or a pro. Dude, I learn from everyone. And I always go into every situation thinking that if I'm the smartest person in the room, then I'm certainly in the wrong room. And I know you've all heard that phrase, and it is so true. And even if I am the smartest person and I have a lot to offer, I make sure that I share my gifts, with everyone around me. So I never have an excuse not to be of service. You get my point? Now, to give you an example, my guest today is a fantastic athlete, right? He's a writer, he's a pianist, he's a composer who's managed to establish, and now hear me out, guys, an 18-year career. That's a long time, and that's not by coincidence. with one of the top-selling country artists in the world, while managing his own career and philanthropic responsibilities. And the only way to do that is by obtaining the qualities that I've just mentioned. And the reason why I mention this, guys, is because I've seen it all too often. Like, many artists destroy their opportunities even before they get there because of their impatience, their ego, or their desire for immediate gratification, which is such a downfall in today's society. And in this business, dude, I hate to break it to you, that's a luxury that many never get to see. You know, you have to compare this industry to a marathon and not a sprint. Meaning what? Well, you got to put in the hours. You got to put in the repetitions, just like a bodybuilder does to build their physique. It takes years of building robust contacts and relationships and opportunities. But the caveat is you have to sustain these relationships and those contacts that you've built, because you never know when your opportunity will show up. And dude, you better be ready, because I will guarantee you this: that killer opportunity only comes around once. And if you're not prepared, then I don't want to hear it when you're like, oh man, I wasn't ready, because I've heard that way too often. And one thing that I always try to address, my fellow artists, is this. And listen, okay? Let's be realistic. The chances of you being born are astronomically low. So isn't it in your best interest to live your best possible life and maximize those opportunities that you're given, right? My answer is hell yeah, especially if it's something that you're truly passionate about. You know, don't take anything for granted. Be kind. And when you help others realize their dreams, then guess what? You realize your dreams even quicker. And oh yeah, it feels so damn gratifying, especially when people let you know how valuable you are to their successes. And no, I'm not saying doing it for that reason. You're supposed to help people unconditionally because it's the right thing to do. And you have no idea what opportunities may come and develop from it, as in the case of my guest today. Because when you contribute to somebody's success, and you do it for the reasons that you love, then that's just a recipe for greatness on all levels. And I just really wanted to preface this before I bring my guest on today, because many of you out there listening to this podcast need to understand the value of living life to the fullest, which means what? Doing the things that you love, taking pride in your pursuits, and helping and uplifting others to their greatness. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, people. And hear me out on this. You never know whose life you're going to touch, right? Or whose life you're going to inspire. But here's the kicker: whose life you're going to save. Because I have, and I had no idea that I have touched so many lives internationally. So think about that for a second. Think past you and your accolades for a second. And when I come back, my guest will elaborate on how he managed to sustain an incredible and successful career spanning 18 years while donating his time for a bigger cause, way bigger than his own goals, and taking care of his own temple at the same time. So stick around, guys. I've got another fun one for you when we return. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Mojo for Musicians podcast. To learn more about becoming a guest on the show to share your mojo with us, visit mannycabo.com and send us an email in the contact section. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, be sure to give us a positive review on your favorite listening platform. And now, back to the show.
And I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing. I just love that song. And I know damn well I'm going to love this episode because today's guest had a lot to do with the success of that song. And the one and only Tim McGraw. So get excited, people. But first, I want to thank you guys for consistently showing up. And you know me and how I revere the whole showing up principle, where I firmly believe if you keep showing up, you keep growing up, and inevitably, you blow up. So thank you for helping Mojo for Musicians blow up in both the podcast and the music community, because at the end of the day, my whole goal is to inspire as many people as I can, principally musicians, of course, to continue on their creative journeys and to be resilient, and even more so in the face of uncertainty as we have all faced this past year. So thank you all for being an integral part of our growth. And please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes to keep that algorithm favoring us and obviously keep inspiring we artists. But moving on. And I got to tell you, guys, my guest today, you want to talk about versatile. And you guys know me, I'm pretty versatile with my background in sports and photography, acting, singing, and of course, podcasting. Well, my guest today is certainly a force to be reckoned with, and somebody whose interests and hobbies of inspiring and persevering and appreciating life is in complete alignment with what this show is all about. And that's why I titled this episode, Live Like You Were Dying, because this guy certainly takes full advantage of every waking moment that he's alive to maximize not only his potential, but the potential of those that he comes into contact with. And needless to say, he's an incredible keyboardist and vocalist who, as I alluded to before, amassed great success with the legendary Tim McGraw for over 18 somewhat seasons. It's crazy, including triple platinum sales, multi-Grammy nominations, and in 2002, my man was recognized by the Academy of Country Music as Musician Keyboardist of the Year. So you at least get a taste of his musicianship. But Jeff's also been a VP of label operations, representing artists that we know very well, Faith Hill, Tim McGraw, of course, Sugarland. And he's a writer, a book editor. And I love this on his profile, for those of you who don't know. He has 6-time marathon finisher. And if that weren't enough, he completed the Grand Canyon Rim to Rim, where he raises money for brain tumor research while helping amateur athletes getting across these finish lines, as he would say, and helping them transition into public speakers, which is pretty damn cool in my book. And oh yeah, the guy's an actor as well. So there's that. So now that we have introed the crap out of Jeff, let's bring him on and welcome him and his incredible background and history to Mojo for Musician. What's up, Jeff, and welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, Manny, thank you for, wow, you read that just like I wrote it for you. So awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, listen, I can't make this up. This is actually true. And, it's certainly been a long time coming, and I'm so happy it finally came to fruition, brother. So tell me, we already know you're always working on something, right? But can you share with us something that you're currently excited about, my man? Maybe, I don't know, bridge hopping or astronaut aerobics, if there's such a thing.
Well, I've really have been spending a lot of time of late, just as I tend to state, trying to send the elevator back down. I still get to make music of my own. I still get to play with other folks and do other things, but working with a young lady named Maddie True, who is going to see. I tried to say Manny.
I was about to say that. That's cool. Freudian slip.
Talking to you. But I'm doing some work with a young lady named Maddie True, who is about to release a new song called That's the Lonely Talkin', which is kind of her current spin on a more traditional sound. We're going to be releasing that single with her. I'm releasing another single with a young lady named Ashlyn Grace. After that, I'm working on some other projects with some other developing artists and still doing things of my own, but I really get excited about trying to take the lessons I've learned and pass them down and help other people do that. I came to Nashville alone. I did not have people that I could contact and learn from and rely on to maybe give me a leg up. And I know that I would have appreciated that. So I try to be that for other folks.
That's awesome. Yeah. I always have a saying, I hate to be what I loathe the most. And you're right. I'm just like, I go out of my way to at least lend a helping hand, because it is, man, it's difficult, especially getting and delving into this entertainment business as a novice. So many different questions and unanswered questions. And we didn't have Google back in the day. Let's be realistic about that stuff. So I completely get where you're coming from. And that's awesome, man. So let's jump into this interview because there's a few questions that I wanted to ask you. And the first being that you have certainly contributed to the success of many people out there, and especially to McGraw's career as, shall I say, the utility guy. I was trying to find the perfect word for you, or words in this case. And I mean, singing and songwriting and playing. So needless to say, you wore many hats. So my question to you is, did you gradually step into these spaces, or were you thrown into the fire? And did the pressures of having so many of these responsibilities ever affect your performance on an everyday life, for that matter?
I wouldn't say that I was thrown into things. I tend to be willing to step into things. Um, you know as well as I do that sometimes we do things because we have our way of wanting to see them done.
Right.
Sometimes we step into those things because they need to be done, and the job that needs to be done isn't especially attractive. So people are very willing to raise their hands for the fun parts, but they don't raise their hands for the crummy parts.
Right.
So I have oftentimes been the guy that would raise his hand when someone said, okay, we also have a job that's not very fun, that's not very exciting. You won't get any credit, but you will get blame if it fails. And
that's great
who wants
incentive.
that
Great
job?
incentive.
And I've often kind of stepped into those roles. Now, that being said, when I was out with Tim, we saw the advent of social media. It was not a factor when we started on tour with him back in 93. It would all websites and MySpace and Facebook and Instagram, all of that would develop over time. And if we wanted photographs, somebody had to have a camera. I would throw one in my pocket. If we needed an article, someone would need to write it out so we could post it to the fans on the website.
Right.
I was the one that was present for the activities. So I was the one in a position to write the story because I was there. Could someone else write it? Maybe, if they were there, but they weren't there. Right. So a lot of things I just kind of developed out of necessity. Now, that being said, my skill set for my whole life has been in a lot of ways soft skills, playing piano, writing, reading. I grew up as an asthmatic, and there were a lot of days that I could not go out and take on the world because of a severe wheeze, cough, whatever.
Sure.
But it was very easy for me to sharpen the tools behind a piano with books, with pencils, with, those kind of skills. And those are pretty sharp tools for me now. Developed other things as well, but they're just skills that I'm able to use. So yeah, I just use them when I can.
Blessings in disguise, I should say, because when you couldn't work on one thing, obviously, your acute sense, well, if I can't do this, I might as well work on my other aspects of my career. Sure, absolutely. And that's a smart thing to do. And many of us don't do that. And I'm a culprit sometimes. I'm like, you know what, I'll do that later. I'll get around to it. And we all know that getting around to it later never comes by. So yeah, good on you, brother. Good on you. And dude, you led such an incredibly successful career. In fact, a career that most musicians, dream of, from accolades to financial consistency, sold out arenas, being in the limelight, and not just one, but multiple successful projects and collaborations, like the Dance Hall Doctors, as an example. So my question too for you is, what advice would you have for the millions of musicians out there listening who don't really necessarily want to be the all eyes on me guy, the lead role, because the fly under the radar peeps, as I would call them, and truth be told, in my opinion, they are the ones that really make the things happen, those unsung heroes, if you will. In so much that I was going to actually co-host a show that we were pitching for some of the networks with Brooke Hogan, who's Hulk Hogan's daughter, on a huge production.
Right.
We were looking to pre-pitch pandemic ideas of like rock, roll, and repeat, which highlighted the unsung heroes, the people that actually weren't the main stars that got all the behind-the-scenes stuff done. So, Jeff, what piece of advice can you give to those out there looking to be a part of an amazing team or outfit that yields great success like you have, of course? And better yet, how do you make yourself an undeniable candidate for the spot? And I'm sure there's multiple variables that need to be upheld, which you have done quite well. So please share your thoughts, man.
Well, I would say that I don't know how much of this is advice because I don't know how to advise
Mm,
this, but I think if you can either develop or retain an appreciation for being that support player,
mm,
I think that's critical. I think the best stars know how to be support players.
I agree.
Um, I've heard you talk, I think on your podcast about how you played baseball and you threw a 90-mile hour per hour fastball or
Yeah.
something, and you acknowledge that you could not have won that, but while you were playing as a pitcher, I played right field,
Mm.
which tends to be kind of an unsung position. But you can throw 90-mile per hour fastballs for an entire game, and one dinger out in right field. If I don't do my job, you lose the game,
Right,
or you don't
right.
have a no hitter. Or I would say that if you recognize that, the easiest way to recognize that is find a way that you can play that role for somebody else, because it helps you remember that role is important
Right.
because you've learned how to play it in somebody else's environment. And whether that means you put together a press photo, you're a photographer,
Right.
As a photographer what you need as a photographer to help somebody uh, create their album cover. Well, because you do that, because you have done that, and because you know what that's like to be the photographer, you are more patient when you're the artist and somebody else is shooting your pictures,
Sure.
because you recognize that, okay, I've done this. I know this guy's struggling with the shadow. I don't see it because I'm not looking through the lens, but I'm going to be more kind, more gracious, more patient, more understanding because I've been in that position.
Right.
I have, you pulled some stuff off of a bio of mine that, at the very bottom of one of those bios, it says who I am. The locals know me at my Waffle House,
I
and I've
love that.
poured coffee on occasion.
Yeah.
And the reason I wrote that, one of the many reasons I wrote that, is because I have, when they've been slammed, picked up a coffee pot and helped bail them out of a jam because somebody didn't show up for work. And if you do those things when you have the opportunity, you remember that you also need to appreciate it when people are doing those things for you. And if you do that, you will have more opportunities to work with other people, collaborate with other people, and share in those opportunities because they'll invite you in. So.
And to add to that, so true, because it's coming from a place of service. And I realize in my experiences that if you look out for people, right, and you help them attain their dreams or their wishes or their goals, then in turn, karma plays a pretty big role because you realize your dreams that much quicker. And I know you do things unconditionally because I do. I guess it's just the way that we were raised. And, that's something that I would do. Listen, it's not my job, of course. And just because I don't, quote unquote, have that in my responsibility to do list, doesn't mean I'm going to help it. And you made a great point with my photography. Coming from my musical background, all I'm doing is bridging the gap because I get it, bro. You don't have to tell me that this is such a struggle or you don't understand the lighting perspectives or the posing because I've been on the other end. So I learned to be more compassionate. You nailed it, man. It's true. And truer words haven't been spoken because in order for you to understand somebody's position, what better way than to actually experience the position? So you not only learn how to deliver something that much better, but you anticipate things that could possibly go wrong or anticipate things from a preventative standpoint, So it's a pretty cool relationship that you build. And of course they appreciate it, man, and I don't have to rely on somebody to step up, which I'm sure you've did multiple occasions.
Well, and in the musical space, you and I both know people that they want to be the star, which is different than being an artist, which is, now there are some that are both, but I know of people that you put a guitar in their hands, they want to play every solo. They want to be in every spotlight.
I've met those.
They want to be, they want it constantly on them.
Right.
Yet we can find times when David Grohl, with the Foo Fighters, invites a fan up on stage to play guitar, and you watch him physically step back into the stage to let him have his moment.
Right.
Keith Urban does the same thing. Great guitar player, but if he invites somebody to join him, he lets them shine.
Sure.
He doesn't feel like that has to be another opportunity to remind everybody that he's the biggest dog on the porch.
Well, it's etiquette. It's etiquette,
It's etiquette, but it's also self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, an awareness of the fact that you don't have to bark to let people know that you're the biggest dog on the porch. Sometimes it's because you're not willing to. You're not willing to do that. I remember I saw an episode on The Tonight Show when Jay Leno was hosting. I believe it was T-Bone Burnett that was performing, and John Mayer was playing lead guitar for him. And he was in the back of the stage. You barely didn't see him. And the only acknowledgement that he was even there was at the end of the episode, where you hear Jay Leno walk over kind of behind the scenes as they're cutting to a commercial, and you hear him kind of say, "Hey, John, good to see you." And that was it.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't there to be John Mayer. He was there to be the guitar player for T-Bone Burnett. And I love being that for Tim McGraw or younger artists. And what a miserable experience I would have had for 18 years if I had been frustrated by the fact that I was not the star at the moment. So I wanted to enjoy that experience and enjoy that position, and fortunately I did.
And that's one of the reasons why I asked, because you're right. There's got to be a separation of those that just want the limelight and those that contribute to that, and understanding that role and really cultivating it, because it's true. It has to do with this deep-rooted ego, of wanting that attention. And when you don't need the attention, then you are utterly comfortable and confident in your abilities. It's like a jealous relationship. If you're going to be watching your girl or watching your guy every time they go out and always have this front, that means you're pretty insecure. You're only projecting your insecurities. And absolutely, I have to agree with you on that. That's why, again, I wanted to pose that question, because so many need to understand the validity and also how valuable it is to be that second person in line that's always there to step it up. Because if you do it for the right people, they will certainly appreciate you. And if they don't, who cares? If Tim McGraw didn't appreciate you, you would know, and you wouldn't be there in the first place. But the reason why you sedimented an 18-year relationship was because you guys had an understanding and mutual respect for one another. And that's where relationships last, because you're sure of who you are. And that comes with practice and practice and practice and knowing your qualities. Am I correct?
Oh, no, definitely. Now I will say, to the point of practice and practice and practice, one of the things that I am learning now is I practiced so actively of being that support player, of being content just outside of the spotlight, that I have not always been the one to step forward to the mic or put out my own music or host my own projects. And I worked so hard to develop the skills and the contentment of being in that support position that now I have to flex a little extra muscle to kind of say, oh, okay, now I'm going to lead this conversation. I'm going to host this project. I'm going to, you've been, pushing me to start my own podcast project, which I'm in the planning stages of and getting ready to do.
Boy, it's about time, man.
And I'm hosting some other things, and I'm even as I develop some of these artists, I haven't always owned some of the skills and expertise that I have developed because I work so hard to not require that, that sometimes I don't own some of the legitimate experience that I actually have. So that's taking a little work, but it's a good problem to have.
No, it makes perfect sense, because it's funny, and I have to chuckle because I've always been known as somebody, like, you see me on stage, okay? You see tattoos and bald. I'm really boisterous. I get a lot of people that are intimidated until you meet the people that really know me. I'm like, Manny, really? He's like a teddy bear. And it's funny, I'll drag my guitar players on stage. I'll drag people that are good friends of mine that have assisted me on projects throughout the way. I'd be like, I want you to jump on stage. I want you to talk. I want you to introduce. Like, why? Well, because you're an integral part of this, and I want to give you exposure. And I used to tell people when I was on The Voice and La Voz, listen, if my TV appearances can help you catapult your career, then use it, bro. Use it to your advantage, because I worked really hard for that, and I want to at least uplift as many people as I possibly can. Because like you said earlier, you didn't walk into Nashville knowing everybody. You had to hustle your ass off to make these connections. So all I try to do is make it a little bit easier. But here's the thing, though, and I think you're going to agree with me. It's so gratifying for me knowing that I could sit behind the scenes and see somebody take that, that 5 or 10 or 15-second moment of fame, if you want to call it that, and they feel good. Like, seeing them feel good makes me feel good. So that's where I come from. And not that I do that for that reason, because I always do things unconditionally, but it truly is gratifying. And I know it has to be for you as well, Jeff.
It is. It is. Now, I can think of examples when I have worked with some artists, and I will say to them, look, if it helps you to tell somebody that part of my journey was playing on Live Like You Were Dying and working with Tim McGraw for 18 years. If that helps you, it's true. So feel free to use it. Now, I always kind of qualify it, because I don't really like the fact that people are impressed by the fact that I've played with Tim McGraw for 18 years.
Explain. This is interesting. I like where you're going. I think I know why, but I want the audience to hear this.
Well, you can build houses for 18 years and still not learn how to build good houses. I mean, they can still fall down. Right. The fact that you showed up for 18 years doesn't necessarily mean that you developed skills. And now in the music business, it is more difficult to have a career and phone it in. I completely agree with that. But during my 18 years, I helped develop other projects. I worked on other things. You may want to talk about some of those. I don't know. But
yeah. Hey, listen, feel free. This is your segment, my friend. I just pose these questions, but this is great. I like where this is going.
Well, it's just that during that 18 years, I worked on other musical projects. I learned a lot about digital marketing. I developed, some of my video production skills. I have a degree in that from college. I worked on a lot of those things during the course of that 18-year run. And I've continued to develop some of those skills. There are people, you know them, I know them, that may have been out there for 18 years, and they may be really good at whatever the video game of the day is that they're all holed up playing in the back of the bus for 3 hours a day. And they can be good at that. And they may develop a podcast about that or a YouTube channel. And there are ways to excel with that stuff. But 18 years in and of itself does not mean that I did anything other than played the same songs over and over for 18 years. Sure. It could mean that. It could mean, yeah, I was out there for 18 years. I didn't learn a new song for 18 years. I haven't played any of those songs since then, and that ended 10 years ago. So maybe I can't even play my instrument anymore because maybe I didn't learn anything. So 18 years in and of itself does not mean that I'm capable of certain things. I am. That's, I was fortunate to take some of those skills that I was able to cultivate and start working for Byron Gallimore, who's Tim's record producer. You mentioned that, who has worked with Faith, and he worked with Sugarland, and he worked with artists that we developed at the label when I was working with him. That's why he hired me to work at the label, because as Tim's producer, he knew kind of what my skill set was, because we'd known each other for many years.
Sure.
But it wasn't just because, oh, you were there for 18 years, you must know something. Well, maybe
There's got to be
but
some
maybe
substance
not,
there.
you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome, dude. This is such a great topic. And every time we get into a room, man, I could sit here and just, delve deeper into it. But I'm going to move on to question number 3. And this one's a little bit more of a personal question, and now as evidence in my intro and reading about you, dude, there's so many layers, and we've all come to agree with that one here. So I'm trying to narrow down out of the myriad of projects that you've worked on throughout the years, because damn, there's been many, and you've just confirmed that for me. And so many noble causes as well. Like, you raised awareness for brain tumor patients. And this hit home because, as we just discussed, that's why I was waiting for you not to go in too deep, because I knew I was going to bring this up, because baseball was my life at one point. And I know that was inspired on same thing with you, the life of Tug McGraw, who's an incredible relief pitcher, like you said, who coined the phrase, you gotta believe. And I've always been a believer. So it's incredible when reading this, so many things hit home, and for the Mets winning the World Series, and for the Phillies, and that last guy to play under, that's right, my Yankee legend, of course, diehard Casey Stengel. So yeah, there's that. And looking back now, hindsight, Tug and I had more in common than I thought, but unfortunately lost his battle to the brain tumor, of course. And I know this has been a big and passionate venture for you as a member of the board of, I think it was the Tug McGraw Foundation, if I remember correctly. So you guys run marathons all over the country, you support causes. So this question, it comes from the heart. So how did this come about, first of all, and did it contribute to your success as a musician? Because sometimes, I know I do anyways, I need to immerse myself in something positive, or a passionate distraction, if you will, like was the case for you. Would you recommend musicians also delve into something that's personally important to them to balance their career? I have to ask this because I know I enjoy being an advocate against bullying and hate and suicide, and it completes me in a way. Does it do the same for you? Because it makes me a better artist, aside from, well, hugging my little Shih Tzu here. It's a little inside joke for those of you who don't know, because I knew you had a Shih Tzu. I know you were a big Shih Tzu lover who was in a book in the whole 9 yards. But when I'm stressed, I have to engage in things like that. So does it do the same for you? Does it really complete you? Because these are pretty big undertakings, and you're making a huge impact, man. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you for that. I don't know that it certainly kind of became a mission, but I do try to stay aware of when things kind of start adding up into a certain direction, such that you may not have intended to accumulate the tools for a certain thing, but you suddenly wind up realizing that you have them all. Yeah. Then what do you do with that? Why have they all presented themselves to you in that particular, manner? And what are you supposed to be paying attention to that you may not be? As a kid, I was a runner with my dad. Initially, it was kind of a way to combat asthma and to build strength and that kind of thing. And I ran a mile, 2 miles. I would go run an 8-mile race with my dad on Thanksgiving, an hour and a half away. This was back in 75 and 76, when running was not yet the thing. That same race that had 190 people in 75 now has 25,000 people every Thanksgiving in Dallas.
It's crazy, right? Wow.
But and it's grown, but that's kind of how I started running. It wasn't to develop perseverance or any of that. It was just because I'm trying to breathe, and my dad did it, so I would go do it with him. Now, that being said, I was a kid playing piano. That wasn't the coolest thing in my environment. I couldn't play football because that was rolling around in the grass. That would make me sick, and it wasn't really my bag anyway. I did play baseball. I played tennis, developed individual sports, snow skiing, snowboarding, running. My running got a lot more focused when I started playing music. but it was because I know that to have a better chance of succeeding in the music industry, you have to be smarter than a lot of people that are in the music industry.
Great point.
Whether that's financially, not spending all your money in the bar before you leave, or recognizing that it can be kind of grueling. And if you're in better physical shape, and I know you agree with that, you're going to have a better chance of handling the rigors of the road.
Better endurance. Sure. Absolutely.
Right. So I started running consistently the day I went on the road with Tim McGraw, because I knew if they always saw that as a part of my daily routine, they would never get frustrated because it was an inconvenience to their day, because that was how I walked in the door.
And Tim McGraw is a beast. He's in mad shape, man.
Well, he is now, but he was not running with me when I started. I mean, this is 1993. Now eventually, we would run together and we would train together and we would do a lot of things like that on the road together. Right. And I wasn't running marathons. I was just doing it every day. But eventually I was doing it every day and doing a little more and doing a little more and doing a little more, and built up to the point where I could do a marathon. Then life would come in, hits would come along. Tug would, develop his brain tumor, and we were a big part of that journey because we were a part of the family. We all saw it happening, and
of course,
we were present to watch the fight. And I had done my first marathon or two by then, but not for any purpose other than to get to the finish line. And that also was a big training ground for the music industry, because marathoning is, how do you keep doing something that hurts, because that's a part of the process of getting to an end result.
Of course.
That's the music industry. You can learn one by virtue of the other. That can go either direction. And then just as Tim or as Tug was reaching the end of his journey, he chose to take his opportunities to develop the Tug McGraw Foundation to raise money for quality of life brain tumor research. And he started that just as he kind of left us. As that was happening, Live Like You Were Dying was getting recorded. After he passed away, they would begin to develop the initial successes of the Tug McGraw Foundation. Live Like You Were Dying would find its audience. Yeah. Tug's story would become part of that commentary, as it spoke to one of the reasons Tim chose to record that song.
And what an incredible soundtrack to tell the story. My God, what an amazing
song.
Of
Course.
Wow,
yes.
Perfect timing.
Yes.
It was like the perfect storm.
Yeah. Fortunate and unfortunate all at the same time.
Of course.
And so eventually the foundation exists. The song exists. I've got marathon training. What do we do with all of that? Well, I know how to do things that suck. We've already talked about that. Right. So
embracing the suck, as we call it.
yeah, exactly. So there were people that wanted to join that effort. They wanted to support the foundation. They had their own stories about how brain tumors had touched their families, and how can we all kind of align, and with what tools can we use to support the foundation? Sure. Well, I knew how to do part of that marathoning stuff. And I had a colleague, a college friend of mine named Kevin Leathers, who was living in Memphis and had done that on an elite level. He knew how to get people on podiums. He knew how to help people win. I knew how to get people across the finish line. So we worked together, helping amateur athletes confront their demons and maintain the memories of those they loved, and began to raise money for that cause through marathoning. And
It's incredible how stories come together, right? How
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
journey just ties up neatly at the end. And initially you look back like whatever months ago, you're like, I never would have planned that. I didn't see that coming at all. It's incredible.
Well, you don't see it coming, but then again, I heard somebody in a clubhouse room recently talk about, think about who you were when you were 7, 8 years old, and that's who you really are. You know, at the end of the day, that's who you really are. Well, who was I at 7 years old? I was playing piano on my own, reading books on my own because I was wheezing. I couldn't go to class. When I could breathe, I was running with my dad, and he and I would go to the coffee shop on the weekend. Well, what am I doing now? Well, I've run 6 marathons, still playing piano for other people, and I will go have breakfast at the Waffle House tomorrow morning.
Point well taken. I love it.
You know, it's kind of the same thing. So as much as we evolve, do we really?
Right.
I don't know.
I have to agree with that. I never really thought of it that way because it's true. I sit here, I'm taking pictures. I love baseball. I just watched Yankees and Red Sox the other night. It's these little things that when you start, going back in that little time machine that we have going, wow, you're right. I still love the things that I did back then. Sometimes I feel alone. Sometimes I feel like crying. Sometimes I feel like just being mischievous. So it really is. You are an extension of your childhood, and you'll always be that way. But that's the beautiful thing about life. We should all be more like children sometimes and never lose that, because once we lose that innocence, that desire, that spontaneity to be fun, and that's when it gets a little sad, and I wish the world could hold on to that a little bit longer between you and me, of course. But dude, well, we've come to the winter seasons of this interview, and I appreciate the transparency and sharing. So I'm going to leave you with my last question of the episode, which is, and it's my signature question, which is, what's your mojo, bro? Why do you continue to perform, Jeff? You don't really have to. You keep writing music, you run these marathons, because apparently you've had plenty of success, and you don't really need to keep that going to prove anything to anyone. So what's the mojo that keeps you doing what you do?
I never really felt like I was doing it to prove anything to begin with, outside of trying to, maybe prove something to myself, just to remind myself, okay, how do I remember to do things that are hard? You go do things that are hard. That's what you do. You practice. And
so simple, right? It's so damn difficult to do.
it is, but should it be? I mean, that's also part of, I think, what you were just talking about. We should be more like children. That's one of the things I love about grown-ups that want to learn instruments. And I've said this in other forums, but it's so hard for an adult to learn an instrument because they feel like after 2 weeks they should be able to play the new song by Sheryl Crow.
Sure.
And they don't feel the sense of pride that they should from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star that we did at 7. But they should. And the fact that you just ran a half mile without stopping, the fact that you just figured out how to put your logo on your own graphic, or you made dinner without setting the kitchen on fire. Those are accomplishments. Sure. and those are things. So if I've got any kind of mojo, it's just my effort to not always remember, but know that I need to always remember that everything's a process, and everything requires practice, and everything can be improved if we invest in it. We just have to remember that we have to do that. And I don't always remember that. I have to remind myself often. I will take a lot of conversations that I have advising people, in different ways, and I'll take those notes back and I'll say, okay, Jeff, this is what you just told Manny. Now, are you doing that yourself? Are you, because
dude, I do that too. I'm like, what a charlatan you are, Manny. Stop. You just told him. I get it, dude. I'm not going to lie, because what's that called? The imposter syndrome that's been thrown around.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Well, and it can be imposter syndrome, but it can also be just a more healthier way of saying, am I taking my own advice?
Right.
Because you can give good advice and still not always remember to take it.
Sure.
Sure. You know, so yeah, if there's anything that I would consider to be mojo, it's just trying to take my own advice and remember to sharpen my own swords, and remember that everything we know how to do well, we learned by practicing. Because if we never learned anything and we never practiced everything, we would not have rolled over in the first time. We would not have learned to walk. We would not have learned to speak. We would not have learned to eat with a fork. We would not have learned anything. Everything we know, we had to learn at some point.
Right. Well, I'm going to close this segment with a cheesy pun, but so appropriate. You know, life is a marathon, not a sprint. So with that, before you go, Jeff, this has been amazing. Please tell the audience how they can find you, man, if they want to know more about Mr. Jeff McMahon and all the accomplishments and things that you're working on, brother.
Well, I don't know about all the accomplishments, but certainly I'm pretty active on Instagram, and I'm present on other social platforms, but you'll find me more often there. Everything's kind of headquartered at McMahon Says. So www.mcmahonsays, McMahonsays.com. I'll kind of thread everything through there. So if you're trying to find me on Facebook, there's a link. Trying to find me on Instagram, there's a link. YouTube stuff, there's a link. As I get this podcast thing developed, I'll make sure and post it there. And then I'm on Clubhouse periodically, hosting things and doing projects. So awesome. Everything kind of operates from there.
Well, listen, bro, I wish you much abundance and success, especially on your new podcast venture. I'm here for you if you need any help in any capacity. And this has been an amazing segment. Totally appreciate you, what you've done, and all your contributions to the music community, and for sharing your transparency, brother, with my listeners, man. I got nothing but love for you, and we got to do this again.
Thanks, Manny. I enjoyed it. And if you find yourself back in my zip code, we need to go have breakfast.
Oh, we're going to Waffle House, brother. You don't have to tell me twice, brother. All right. With that being said, man, love you, brother. And I'll talk to you real soon. Have an amazing day, Jeff.
You too, man. Thank you so much, Manny.
All right, my man.
This has been a Mojo for Musicians podcast. If you're a musician, producer, engineer, or any other industry professional wanting to share your mojo and stories of success with our listeners, or just want to share some feedback on today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. So just send us an email at info@mannycabo.com. Thanks for listening.